Feed the neighborhood with a tailgate-ready Big Bow Box. It's bow time.
Welcome back to Extra Points. This is Colby Reece, and joining me today, as always, our sports editors of The Breeze, Kaiden Bridges and Jackson Hephner. Very interesting game last week for JMU. A big, hyped-up game, and it lived up to the hype, if you ask me. What is kind of y'all's thoughts on the game and how it played out last week in Charlottesville?
I mean, we had a 72-minute rain delay with 12 minutes and 6 seconds left of the fourth quarter. JMU down by 11 points, and miraculously won 36-35, so it definitely was a crazy fourth quarter. So JMU pulled together the comeback and what seemed a little doubtful before the rain delay, but in the locker room, JMU players were saying they hit the reset button and were able to kind of come back for the win. So very interesting.
I think if you were to write a script for that game and pitch it to Hollywood, they would say it was too unrealistic. I mean, everything that could have happened in a football game happened. And these teams hadn't met in like 40 years, and they made that first meeting in 4 decades. I mean, they really hit the ground running, and they gave us an incredible football game, start to finish. And people are going to talk about that ending, but just looking at the whole game, I mean, it's just hard to believe, just looking back on it.
Absolutely crazy, and JMU benefited from the rain delay. They were able to kind of take that to come together and come out with the 1-point win, despite not playing their best, I think some would say. So let's kind of head into looking forward to the Troy game this week. They're playing the defending Sun Belt champions. It's a big game. They're not the favorites, and they have a lot of areas to improve in. What does JMU need to kind of improve upon after the UVA performance?
Yeah, so as you said, JMU is not the favorite this weekend. Last time I checked, I think it was Wednesday, Troy was the 3-point favorite. But I mean, looking at the offense, there's still some goods and there's some bads, obviously. But Jordan McLeod had his first JMU start and finished with 224 yards and a touchdown. I mean, I thought he had a pretty solid performance. Tyson Lawton also had another great week for the running back chart. I mean, 79 yards and 2 touchdowns coming in when JMU needs that kind of boost in the offense. So Cignetti mentioned after the game that he's really been a key player for this offense and has come in and made big plays when the offense really needs it. So I think he'll definitely play a big part in this game against the Trojans this weekend.
Yeah, and then, we look on the other side. I think the big question mark right now for JMU is their defense, specifically their pass defense. You look at this unit, they have a very strong defensive line. They got 4 sacks against UVA. James Carpenter made some really big plays, including that blocked pass on the final drive to really, help kind of, secure the win for JMU. Their defense, up front, they're playing very well. But you look at the secondary, and there's a lot of issues there. UVA had 377 yards in passing, and that was led by a true freshman, Anthony Calandria, if I believe I'm saying that correctly. But yeah, it was just a very shaky performance from the Dukes in the secondary, and against Bucknell they didn't look that great either. So I think Cignetti mentioned how he's expecting Troy to go in, even though Troy is a very run-heavy team. He's expecting Troy to go in and try and make some passes. So it's going to be really interesting to see how does Troy adjust their game plan, and will it be enough to catch JMU secondary off guard? And if it is, the Dukes could be in trouble this week.
Yeah, and it's like, you look at that pass defense, I mean, they almost gave up. Like, if they made that pass on the last play that they had on 4th down, UVA did, like, that would have just kind of encapsulated kind of how JMU's pass defense played, because, I mean, he was open, and that would have been even crazier talking about that now. And it is very interesting. JMU's run defense has been one of the best in the country. They actually have the best run defense per rush. They only allow just over 1 yard per rush, and that's ranks first in the country right now. So what do y'all kind of see out of Troy looking to obviously use that passing game to tackle on JMU's kind of disadvantage in the defensive area, but also stick to what's been really true for them, and they've been a really good running team this year?
Right. As you mentioned earlier, they are the defending Sun Belt champions, and if JMU didn't have the 2-year transition rule last year, they would have faced the Trojans last year in the championship after defeating Coastal Carolina. So I think this is a matchup that's been looked forward to from both teams for quite some time now. But definitely, I mean, Troy's going to sorry. Troy's going to try and come off a 42-13 loss from number 15 Kansas State last week. And junior running back Kamani Vidal has 42 carries and 331 yards on the season so far and has really shown out for the Trojans. So I think especially being such a run-heavy team, they're still going to try and utilize him this week for sure.
Yeah, Troy is a really interesting team. I think it's a case like similar to JMU where we really don't know much about them this year. Their season opener that was against SF Austin, they beat them 48-30, so not a great win against an FCS program. And then they had that 42-13 loss to number 15 Kansas State. And the Wildcats are a good team. I mean, that's a solid football program all around. So it's really hard to kind of like out of those two games kind of pick out what exactly we can expect from this Troy team. But I will say they're returning 19 starters across the board from that Sun Belt Championship squad, and it's an established program. They have a winning culture. They're very similar to JMU in that aspect. And I think, considering the glaring issues that JMU has had in the past two games, I have a hard time seeing the Dukes going down to Alabama and coming back with a win.
Yeah, for sure. And as you mentioned, this is a very big game because, like you said, JMU would have played Troy in the Sun Belt Championship game if that transition rule wasn't in place. So definitely both teams, kind of Troy wanting to prove that, obviously it's a new season, but just kind of getting that win over JMU and JMU wanting to kind of go down there and kind of say like, who knows what would have happened if things weren't the way they were last season. Let's get into some predictions. We've kind of touched on a lot of areas. JMU not looking too good. So what are y'all's thoughts?
For me, it's Troy 28-17 this week. Obviously coming off that big road win last week, but Cignetti said this week that he didn't think he had his team's focus. And to me, it's like this is the second week in a row they're on the road. They're on the road next week. So and they're going down to a tough environment. So I do think the Trojans are going to come out with the win.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking similar along the lines to what Kaiden's thinking. I have a 35-21 for the Trojans. When Cignetti said that he didn't have his team's focus this week, I think for me, it was a huge red flag. I mean, you're talking about a team that has a winning culture. They're used to winning championships every single year. They're coming off of this emotional win. And if they can't get focused to play the defending champions, then that could be a real problem for this team. And, I think I worried even just beyond Troy, is there any complacency in this roster, especially after a lot of the noise and the clutter that surrounded the end of last season with the Kings of the East and then going into this season with the big win over UVA. I think that's going to be a big question mark for them moving forward.
For sure. And if you can't get kind of hype and kind of ready for a defending Sun Belt champions, knowing that JMU wants to kind of go prove a point, then that's really concerning. I am going to say Troy is going to win. I do think it'll be a bit closer than y'all kind of think. I'm going to go 27-24. I think this game might play out similar to how App State played out last season, where JMU just kind of doesn't get off to a good start and makes adjustments in the second half, but I just cannot really see a way for them to go down to Alabama and get a win this week. There's just too many areas, and I just don't think this team is kind of ready to make that jump and get this big of a win. But it should be interesting to see how it plays out. Thank you, Kaiden and Jackson, for joining me as always. And kickoff is set for 7 p.m. tomorrow night on NFL Network.